You're listening to a podcast by Way Collective, a contemplative community for love and liberation in Santa Barbara, California. This conversation was led by Sage Maas, and it's on trans awareness, history, and allyship. It was the conversation starter at our Dinner and Dialogue gathering on February 5th, 2025. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. It means the world to me, and I am happy to be only nervous about public speaking, because I've given talks to non-affirming groups, and that was just scary for everything. So this is nice just to be like, I just have regular anxiety. So thank you all for being here. So the talk is you have the slides. It'll be a smattering of different topics, questions, a little story of like my journey. If we could give the trigger warning. So it is a heavy topic. It's a very timely topic. So there will be discrimination, housing insecurity, violence, homicide, suicide, and Nazis. Yes, like not the present ones, the past ones. Next slide. So again, thank you for being here. This is just, I started writing this before everything happened. And as you know, it's pretty crazy for any minority, but trans people have been under attack. There have been 9 executive orders. This was on Monday. There's a 10th one that I checked before I got here. And they're not just executive orders. They're also doing stuff outside of that. They also had the CDC remove any academic papers that have the word transgender in it. That wasn't an executive order. They banned Social Security from changing gender markers. So it's not just executive orders. It's crazy out there. Next slide. But yeah, so we arrived here with what is transgender? So it's basically the best definition me and my friends could workshop is it means that you experience incongruence from the gender you were assigned at birth. To explain that more, we have some more topics to get through. So, sex, gender, sexuality. Some of the words are interchangeable in common language, but for our purpose and academics' purposes since the 1945, sex is the physical characteristics. So you have stuff like chromosomes, reproductive organs, hormones, and generally it's female, male, and intersex. This is like the basis, so we gotta like make sure that this is good. Gender, so that's more of like the soul, the mind. So that's roles and responsibilities, attributes, entitlements. And so this one you get some more. You have female, male, non-binary, genderqueer, and some more. And someone told me that I should share this little example of the difference, or just like a little question for y'all. So if you had your brain put in a robot, would you still know your gender? And if everyone treated that robot with you in a brain as a robot, and you're like, but I'm a human, would you still know that you're a human? This was my friends wanted me to share that just as an example of what being trans is, having your gender and your sex not align. And sexuality is basically who you're attracted to or not attracted to. So everything, no attraction to all attraction. Intersex. So I don't know if y'all are aware of intersex, but there are multiple different facets. It's basically when your body at birth doesn't perfectly align with male and female. That can be chromosomes, that can be physical attributes, that can be hormones. This talks about intersex. I had a whole slide about all of the examples. We had to cut 2/3 of this talk to fit it in tonight. But basically, something to know, intersex people, they're about 1.69% of the population estimated. Redheads, 1 to 2%. That is higher in Ireland and lower in other countries. But like So people will criticize me for saying if you've seen a redhead, you've seen an intersex person. But it's a pretty good way to think about it, in my opinion. So, gender. Ooh. Well, there was a photo of Judith Butler at one point. And if you have ever heard anything about Judith Butler, she is the most well-known philosopher on gender. But what's crazy is most people don't get what she actually is trying to say. She has a famous quote that says, "Gender, as an objective, natural thing, does not exist." And a lot of people think that it's like, well, like there's no differences between male, female. It's like, well, she explains we have a range of differences in nature. So I don't deny them, but I don't think they determine who we are. So we can recognize the beautiful differences in how we're all created and made and born. And at the same time, we can still be whoever is in our soul. And now we get to go to trans after laying the base work. So trans is inclusive of multiple categories. I'm sorry if you're cisgender and you got the little gray umbrella, but we get the colorful ones. So if you're trans and you're in the umbrella, it just means that you do not identify with the gender you were assigned at birth. So you have trans men, trans women, but then under the trans umbrella, you have non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid, bigender, agender. So you can have non-binary in the trans umbrella. We're almost to the end of this section. Gender dysphoria. So the best definition we could get is gender dysphoria is distress or discomfort felt by an individual due to a differing of their gender at birth and their gender identity. Some people are able to recognize their transgender when they're super young, and some people don't realize it until later. Both are super valid. And I should note, there are different types of gender dysphoria. There's cognitive, social, and body. You'll most often see body portrayed in media. That's when someone looks at a mirror and is just like, I hate everything. And you can experience parts of one or parts of others. I really experience a lot of social. I want to be socially perceived as transgender. But I still have some body dysmorphia. Cognitive is how you perceive yourself. A little more intricate definition. And not everyone experiences gender dysphoria, but it is a big theme throughout the community. So this is me. If you have only met me recently, the left photo is me in 2022. That was taken Christmas of 2024, the little one, or the lower one. And the little one up in the right, that's me when I'm 4 with my grandma. Is probably my favorite photo of me at that age. So we can go. So basically, I'm just gonna do a brief summary of my transgender experience. So I was born on the coldest day in Chicago. I think it was -35 wind chill. They had to follow a snowplow to get to the hospital. I came out at 9 pounds, 8 ounces, the smallest baby of my mom. We moved to San Luis Obispo when I was 3, and then I went to UCSB and kind of stuck around ever since. Being raised Christian, my earliest memories that I can remember is every night just praying, getting told of this God that can paint the heavens, the skies, flood the earth. And it was if you can do that, this should be chump change that I wake up female. Every single night, I would pray that. Never happened. But so in any video game I'd play as a female character. I would avoid haircuts like the plague. They'd have to drag me. I would be so sad when I got a haircut. And then 4th or 5th grade, I Googled gender change surgeries. And for some reason on YouTube, they had the full surgery with all the blood, the incisions, removing parts. And I watched it and I was what I would call squeamish now, I kind of took it as, oh, this isn't for me. So I kind of put that in the back of my mind for many years. And then I hit puberty, and then sexuality was like figuring out that I was bi in the church, that kind of took precedent, especially since that was Prop 8 time. Any old people remember that? If you don't, congratulations. Next slide. So even though I stopped processing it, it never went away. Every time that I'd be at a church group or something and they'd separate us by gender, I get super sad. And eventually I was kicked out of church for being bi in 2021. And it made me really evaluate everything. And that's when I started deconstructing. And eventually just accepting my queerness. And immediately after accepting my sexuality, all that gender dysphoria that I had repressed all those years just came right in, smacked me in the face. And that just kind of led me to my gender transition, which y'all have been a part of, so thank you. I changed my name, moved into a van to a Ford transitioning. I lost my family, I lost my partner, lost most of my friends, but I found myself. And that is me 1 month in at my work, just super happy, just been like, all right, it's starting. No questions for this section. Now we're going to get into statistics. So the US population, there are 1.6 million people age 13 and above. That is 0.6%. It is a lot smaller than the Republican media would like you to believe. But it is larger than it was in the past. And why is there an increase in the trans population? Similar to left-handedness, if you stop beating people for writing left-handed, there will be more left-handed people. If you are stop bullying or stop being horrible to trans people, it'll go up, but eventually it'll plateau. There is a cap of people who are just left-handed. You're not going to get more left-handed people than there are left-handed people. So it's going to get a little sad, and I am sorry, but the homelessness and housing instability among LGBT youth, homelessness is really rampant within the trans community. But the best stats we have for all these things are going to be among the youth. So most of the stuff I pull up here is from a study in 2021, 2022 for the next ones. 28% of LGBT youth reported experiencing homelessness, and it's much higher for trans kids. So 38% of transgender girls, women, 39% of transgender boys, men, 35% of non-binary youth, compared to 23% of just being queer youth. You come out, you become an orphan and homeless, all in once. Magic trick. Youth are LGBT youth are overrepresented among young people experiencing homelessness. So the queer population is estimated to be 7 to 9%, and 29% of youth experiencing homelessness are queer. So for such a small population, huge part of the whole population. And then we get into trigger warning suicide and suicidal ideation. So it is really, really high for the queer community, and the trans community is even higher. So this is a study in 2022 for 13 to 24-year-olds, biggest one that was conducted. If you came out before age 13, you had a 62% of considering suicide. 51 if you came out at 13 or older, and 30% attempted at 13 if you came out before 13, 17 if you came out at 13 or older. A beautiful point, though, is the next slide. If your family supports you, it is cut in half, which is huge. So everyone here that has trans kids, is a trans parent, you're saving lives. And every time I see it, I cry a little. And thank you for just accepting. Because it's huge, and the numbers follow up with it. Okay, last statistic is murders of trans people. So again, for such a small population, tons of murders. And so this data was capped at November 19th of 2024. So it's definitely much higher. 372 people in the US alone were murdered for being trans. Not just they were trans and they were murdered, it was a hate crime and they were murdered. And most of those people are trans women of color. 61% were trans women of color. Most of them are transgender women, that's 83%. What's crazy is most of them occur in 10 states: Texas, Florida, California, Georgia, Louisiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Maryland, and North Carolina. Thanks for sitting with me through the hard stats. And now some hard history. So, what is cool though, we have evidence of trans people basically as long as we have evidence of people. It goes back 5,000 years. Most civilization recognized third or multiple genders, and the local Chumash to acknowledge land acknowledgement to the people that lived here still do. But they were referred to, they had third gender called Aki. And this next one is, I had so many slides for this. I just decided that this paragraph was probably the most important way to approach transgender and colonialism. So, Vasco Núñez de Balboa was the first European to reach the Pacific Ocean by the way of the Americas, claiming its shores for God and country. Like many Europeans of the 16th century, including the French and British in North America, Balboa was horrified by what he described as rampant effeminacy in the native men. Upon finding one tribe to be infected with the most abominable and unnatural lechery, where the indigenous king's brother and a host of young men dressed in women's apparel, smooth and effeminately decked. He rounded up about 40 of these effeminate men, stripped them naked, and unleashed on them a pack of ravenous dogs that tore them limb from limb. A 1590 engraving of the massacre depicts bloody bodies, severed heads, and ferocious dogs sinking teeth into terrified faces as a group of European men, flamboyantly dressed in tassels, ribbons, and embroidery, hips daintily cocked to one side, stand watch. The rest of the tribe gave tokens to God in repentance and converted to Christianity. History is filled with stories of Christian colonizers enacting harsh and often murderous punishment on savages whom they believed to be violating gender. 500 years later, the concept of effeminacy and emasculation continue to shape how Christians think about gender. And the text is from Heavy Burdens by Bridget Eileen Rivera. Super gnarly. So there have been trans people forever. They just were all murdered, a lot of them. Moving into more modern day history. So this is Germany, probably around 1920s. Magnus Hirschfeld. If you've never heard of Magnus, he is the homie. Absolutely love Magnus Hirschfeld. He was one of the most influential sexologists of the 20th century. He created advocacy groups for homosexual and transgender rights, and he coined the term transvestite in 1910, which was not as salacious as it is now. It just meant everything from cross-dressing to full trans surgeries. It's basically what we'd consider transgender today. It's just, words changed throughout time. So this is probably one of the earliest times it was given a word in our Western society. And he established the Institute for Sexology. So this is the Institute of Sexology, and it was in Berlin, in Germany. They performed gender-affirming surgeries in 1931. And they attempted uterus transplants. They had, it was flourishing. Research was getting done, science was getting done. People were getting to live their lives. And Magnus provided transvestite passes, which if you, cross-dressing was illegal, being trans was illegal. If you were getting arrested and you provide one of these passes to the police, you could go home. So, huge. As we know about Germany in 1920, things are about to get worse. So the Nazis targeted Dr. Hirschfeld and the Institute. He had to flee to France, where he died. The Institute was sacked, books were burned, trans passes were revoked, or just largely ignored eventually. Though, of note, Dora Richter. the first male to female to undergo modern surgery, fled and lived to the age of 74. They thought the Nazis got her, and she got away. So she lived until 1966. Go Dora Richter. So there's some photos, but basically, this is the Institute of Sexology, the Nazis sacking it, and basically any photo or video you see of Nazis book burning, that is the Institute of Sexology, that is trans science, that is queer science. That was Belle Paz Square, the 10th of May, 1933. So they don't tell you that in school. It's about to get darker as the theme of the night. So people from the Institute, people that were gay or trans or genderqueer, they got sent to concentration camps. What is super gnarly is that after the war, they didn't get to go free. They just continued prison sentences. If you were Jewish, if you were like political prisoner, you got to go home. Not the case if you were gay or transgender. So we know very little about what happened to these people. And they enacted really harsh brutality against them. If you know the yellow star that Jewish people had to wear, it was a pink triangle for gay and trans people. Later during the AIDS crisis, it became reclaimed, but it is a very gnarly moment in the history. Christine Jorgensen. Okay, it gets a little better. So Christine Jorgensen served in the US Army in World War II. This is Christine Jorgensen before like 1950. She went to Denmark, got gender surgery, came back, wrote a letter to her parents. That letter got published by the New York Daily News. She became a sensation. She wrote books. She was in movies. She lived a good life, was a trans advocate. We love her. And then Stonewall. So if you do or do not know, June is Pride Month. In the US at least, some other countries, but it's because of Stonewall. It's the reason we have Pride marches. Basically, being gay and trans and cross-dressing was illegal. A bar was raided by police, and instead of just taking the beatings and getting arrested, trans women of color revolted, started brawling, and it ended up in 6 days of rioting. And these trans women of color that were instrumental in getting queer people their rights and marches and protests, they were kept out of Pride afterward, which is crazy. Getting through. Okay. I'm excited to say that I think this section's a little more fun. Frequently asked questions. Can you tell who's trans? You have permission right now to guess on the slideshow. No cheating, no lying. You don't have to put your hands up. But the first person, so was this person, were they assigned female at birth or were they assigned male at birth? Write down your answer, I don't know, whatever you want. It's your choice. I'll give you like 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, they were assigned female at birth. This is, I don't have it memorized, so I'm waiting. Perfect, thank you. This is Leo McKellen, a proud trans man, TikToker. Beautiful, love him. Next one. So, were they assigned female at birth? Were they assigned male at birth? There's a little bit of a hint if you're in the in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Did anyone get it? This is Gottmik, a proud trans man. So they were assigned female at birth. 2 more, if you haven't gotten any yet. So this is a more publicly known figure, AFAB or AMAB. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. This is Alona Mayer, a cis woman. So she was assigned female at birth. A nurse, rugby, Olympian, Dancing with the Stars finalist, influencer. And last one, were they assigned female at birth or assigned male at birth? 3, 2, 1. They were assigned male at birth. This is Gigi Gorgeous, a trans woman. There's a documentary about her. amazing, wrote a fun book. Did anyone get 100%? There's a mathematical chance it happened, and also you just might know these people. So I'm not putting it past people, but the whole point of all of this, hopefully it was a little fun, was while you can guess, the only true way is to know if someone is trans is if they share it with you. Okay, what about science? So Rob helped me craft this one. Science, the whole point of science is to understand and explain what is observable. It doesn't have to be observable with the naked eye, but just an electron microscope, or if we can observe it in some way. So, that being said, it is observable that a large portion of the population reports an incongruence from their gray matter, their brain, and their body. That is observable. No one can deny that there is a large part of the population that experiences this. And just because it's not explained doesn't mean it's not science. Okay. Isn't there a high regret rate for transgender surgeries? There is a 1% regret rate for transgender surgeries, which, on the contrast, means 99% of people were happy, which is crazy because across all surgeries, the average is 14%. Like, cis people are getting surgeries all the time, and they're not getting questioned whether they regret it or not, because there is a lot of regret. But for it to be 1% is insane. The regret, and then there is no surgery in the world that is a 0% regret rate, and there's no decision in the world that has a 0% regret rate. So you can tell I'm a little salty. What about isn't they, them new? No. So Shakespeare used it, Chaucer, Swift, Fielding, Austen, Defoe, Bryan, Thackeray, Shaw, and it's in the King James Bible of 1611. The singular they, them, when people want to be not she or he. It's been around forever. So nothing new. Okay, we're getting there, I swear. Awesome, okay, so we're through the gnarly stuff. This is how to help. I don't take credit for this. This is from transequality.com. So mindfulness. There's no one way to be a perfect ally. You don't have to understand someone's identity to respect it. You can't always tell if someone is transgender simply by looking at them. Each transgender individual approaches their journey differently. There's no one right way to be transgender. Interactions. Boom, boom, boom. Use the language that the transgender person uses for themselves. Easiest way to figure it out. If you don't know, you can ask them what their pronouns are. And also, sometimes people don't want to get questions all the time. It is also very mindful to, you can always ask, are you open to questions? Because, trans people get tired too, like the rest of us. I know that doesn't seem that way. And then also, you can think about how you use advice based on gender stereotypes. You look like a real man, woman. I would have never guessed you were trans. Oh, you would just look less trans if you got an XYZ. That's a no-no. People get to do whatever they want. You don't have to have hormones or surgeries. You can, if someone says they're trans, believe them. Being outspoken. So basically, politely correct people if they use the wrong name or pronoun for a transgender individual. Bear in mind, we all make mistakes. So just acknowledge it, move on, don't shame people. It's just nice to acknowledge the correct one. Don't worry about it. I still make mistakes for myself, so everyone makes mistakes. Call out transphobic jokes or conversations. Communicate your support. Think about how you use gendered language. There's a lot of male assumptive language. Guys, bro, dude, man. You can probably fill in some more. And that is basically it. I just have some resources, but I have a little point. If that was a lot, thank you for bearing with me, riding this train. Books, Dear Cisgender People, a guide to trans allyship and empathy. This is more like educational. A Girlhood is amazing. This mother has a trans kid, and It is just beautiful, tons of tears. If anyone wants a tearjerker, it's great. And if anyone is a history nerd like me, before we were trans, it's also on Spotify as an audiobook. And it's the history of before the word transvestite was around, from different cultures, and it's super fun. The author is amazing, and they do the author's the one that does the audiobook. They do a great job. Next one, some graphic novels. So transitions. This is another mother's journey to accepting their kid. Amazing. The one that's missing is Genderqueer. It is the most banned book of 2022, and then also is the most banned book of 2023. It had 106 challenges in 2023 alone. So, if people don't like it, it's probably good. Lastly, some movies. The Death and Life of Martha P. Johnson. Amazing, amazing individual, instrumental in Stonewall, getting our rights. She was murdered, and they're going through the case, trying to rework the steps, and they're interviewing people of that time, and it's a lot of history, and it's instrumental person that is not as widely known as they should be because of transphobia. And Will and Harper, so Will Ferrell and his friend, who they work together in SNL, and she came out later in life, and they do a road trip across the US, and it is so heartwarming. If you talk to anyone, they love it. I think. So there's some SB resources. SBTAN, if you have kids, there's a group for that, for parents. There's Lisa's Place, if you are trans. And then there's Pacific Pride, for just if you're queer in any sense of the capacity. We're gonna skip this, but there was a really funny video. There was a anti-trans preacher who had gender-affirming surgery and denies it. They had gynecomastia, which is when you're male and develop female breasts, and she's like, well, wouldn't you what would you think if you develop breasts? And he's like, what? And she's like, gynecomastia. He's like, I had it. It's great. He's still a hypocrite. We did questions and then breakout questions. I don't know if you have time for this, Tim, but that is my talk. You all are so lovely. Thanks for being here. This means the world to me.
Thanks for listening to this podcast by Way Collective. To keep up with our community, you can subscribe to this podcast, go to www.waycollective.org, or follow us on Instagram at @waycollective. Peace and every good, y'all.